Take a look at Polis Fight for Hegemony. Story behind this is kind of interesting. Story behind all my games is kind of interesting, but this one just arrived. When it first came out, it had very good reviews. It's about a subject that interests me a lot. And I was kind of more into Euros and Worros and stuff like that, and was very excited about it. But I never saw a copy that was cheap, and wasn't really excited enough to go out and try to pick it up, brand new or whatever. And then at some point or another, I kind of culled a lot of the games that I had subscribed to, whatever, that, I decided, I just don't know, I had gotten kind of more fatigued with the Euros fairly quickly, to tell you the truth. I kept buying them, and I still do every now and then. But unknown that this was of interest to me particularly, one of my viewers sent me a copy of this because of my current troubles. It's apparently one of their favorite games, and in general, our tastes align fairly heavily in a lot of different ways. So, yeah, that was a really, really nice gesture. And anyway, I was excited to get it. I took a look at it, and it is indeed a little more Euro-ish than maybe I'm in the mood for, but I had already decided to break it open and read the rules and figure it out. And I played a couple of rounds of it. And I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what develops as I play it again on camera, because maybe I'll like it better on camera. Maybe I think I would like it better opposed, to tell you the truth, than I do solo. Let's talk about it a little bit. So you got a board which is divided up into basically regions. This is the Sparta-Athens conflict, right? And we've got a number of games on the subject, and I have trouble kind of remembering some of them. So like Pericles, that I did so long ago, right? Not the more recent the Wallace one, not the God, my brain is just not the Herman one, which is in the Churchill vein, really, and it is a really intriguing game, but hard to make decisions in, right? I remember the Wallace one being kind of light and fun. And then also recently I did Strategos, which goes along with Imperial Governors, an old aerial game, which I kind of liked. And then I've got some others. I've got the Peloponnesian War, the Clash of Arms one that I haven't gotten to yet, and I kind of regret that in terms of picking, going for this first. But honestly, a lot of people say that's a horrible game, or a really undeveloped game. Okay, so you've got your areas of Greece, even Sicily in here, and whatnot. You're not going to see the Persians coming into this as anything other than a trading port. The different areas have cities or polis within them, some of which will have an arrow indicating that they have a coastal existence. There are some polis who do not have a coastal existence. That one does. That one better. It's a port. I'm trying to see. Oh, Thebes is the other one that doesn't. There's like two that don't. Which has an impact. I can't really remember what it was. I know they can't drop galleys. That's one impact. That may be the only one. You have this set over here, which is, this is your trading market. And this game has a lot of levers in it, and you're gonna see, but one of them is as goods move up towards the right, they become less and less valuable, and they can be traded in for either grain or silver. You have this tribute chart, which basically each round someone's able to gain tribute from any given area at a cost. Everything's at a cost. You have these charts which indicate what you have in your alliance, right? So the overall prestige of your faction, and then metals, wood, grapes or wine, oil, silver, and wheat. Now, wheat is really important. You have to feed your people every round. And silver is basically able to be traded for anything. And in particular, you can buy it, you can exchange it for wheat at the important moment. You can also exchange prestige for wheat at that point, which I think is more indicating that your people are starving and you're losing prestige. Although they don't actually disappear from the board, so it's not that much. Each of the poli on the board has one of these tiles going with it. Now, there's multiple scenarios to set up, but the main one runs all 4 eras. And you might say, well, why does it start 3 and go to 5? And there's an alpha and beta. What's up with that? So, yeah, this was one of the things that confused me to begin with. I thought maybe there's like 2 pre-rounds or something like that. No, this is the size of the armies that are allowed in that period, armies and fleets, the number of them that you're allowed to have in any given location, and it also limits these trading locations. So these locations are not, these locations are not poli. You can't, build armies out of them or whatever, but you're allowed to trade with them. In terms of pieces on the board, you have these multifunctional cubes, which will be both your hoplites and your galleys, your army and navy in the game. You have merchant fleets, which serve a very different type of purpose. They're going to conduct the trades over here, and that's all they're used for. Oh, the cubes are also used to represent the populations in your locations, and they're used on this board to indicate what your values are. The circles are used for a couple of different things too. They mark the polis that you actually own, or that are part of your faction, and they're also used to mark areas where you've taken tribute. Doesn't really matter that they're different color for the tribute. Only one person can get tribute from an area, but whatever. What else do we have? We have a set of projects. Each round, 3 of them are going to show up, and they're things that the various polis can produce, and they have a reward, usually in prestige. That prestige can come both at the end of the turn in which you build the project or conduct the project, and then also at the end of the game. And what's kind of weird about them, they're not like, you don't hold on to them as just, look what I've accomplished. You have to hold the particular city that they're associated with. And if the other player takes them, they get the points at the end of the game for them. And in fact, if you start a project in the middle of a round and someone else takes it before the end of the round, they will get the points. Whoever the final owner of it is, will get the points at the end of the round. So you got to be kind of careful about where you're building these things. One place that's safe to build them, though, is your primary capital. That can't really be taken from you. And we'll see what those look like when we look at the rules. We have a bunch of event cards, one for each period. Well, 1 deck for each period, and there's I think 8 cards in each deck, and some of them are no events, but they kind of give you some of the historical flavor, I guess. They're fairly limited. And then you got a bunch of battle cards, which work kind of like the battle cards from We the People or I'm trying to remember the other game that used them, the Hannibal. Another CDG that used them, and other games have used things like this. Basically, you'll get a handful of cards based on the number of pieces you have involved in the battle, and you're playing to try to play cards the opponent can't match to cause damage. I guess that's enough. Oh, and you get a 4-sided die. And unlike the old 4-sided dice that used to have, I'm trying to remember how they worked. I think the old ones had one number along the bottom, and now they've got it on the top. I don't know. They seem to have made a big advance in 4-sided dice. I don't know. I seem to remember having to read the bottom to understand what the actual value was. I'm also using a 6-sider for various decision making, mainly a high-low, because shuffling 8-card decks isn't terribly useful, but I may use it for some other decision making. Let's talk about the game. And you have a glossy rule book like all Euros do, with lots of pictures in it and a bunch of examples, and it's really hard to make your way through it. The rules are very procedural. There's room for a really light player aid in this game, and there is not one here. Instead, you have to wade through all the color and everything in there. What there is, though, is a sequence of play, and that gives you most of what you want. You might end up saying, oh, wait, what does that action do? But I found within a round, I was more or less understanding what the actions actually do. But like a coin game, it's sometimes hard to discern whether and what you want to do in order to get to your goals. Like I said, there's a lot of levers in this game, and it's painful to understand what you need to do to get through a round successfully. And I didn't fail yet. I only played 2, but I didn't fail to get through a round yet. And you know how much you can do, because you can keep doing stuff, but you're starting to maybe expend resources you don't want to expend anymore as you do things. So there's a point at which you decide, I'm just going to pass. When that happens, the other player gets to play as much as they like. Okay. I think we've kind of gone over all of this. Oh, we haven't gone over the numbers and some of the information on here. So this number is the starting population of the location, and you represent that with cubes once you own it. Neutral poli are always at their starting population, even if they had more or less at one point. The middle number is how much the population can be increased in any round, and that happens at the end of the round at the cost of grain. And then the final number is the maximum total size of that polis. It can never get bigger than that, no matter what. Along the edges, there might be some words. Those are the type of projects you can build. No polis can build more than 3 different types of projects, and many of them can't build any. Kind of look and see what we're looking at. Thebes would be a good example to see how rich and powerful they are. They only have 1. They're going to become a massive thing. Here, Corinth has 2. Yeah. Okay. Also, some of them have a little anchor, which indicates that they're an important trading port. And there are only 3 of those in the game. One is Athens, of course, and the other 2 are 2 cities in Sparta's hands at the beginning of the game. And those are going to allow you to do trade. On the map itself, you have a division between land and sea areas, and then these weird neutral areas where troops are not allowed. You have, there's pawns that we haven't mentioned. This is your diplomat. I did not use them yet. They cost a lot to sway a city and may not be, I don't know. You also have this little red or blue area here, which is indicative of where your merchant fleets are stored when they're not sailing somewhere, but they're already on the board. Remember, you have excess over there, but each side starts with one. And this is the initial setup. It's a Proxenos, that's the diplomat. And then they give the setup as sort of this pictorial representation, but they give all the information in text. The picture is just there to make it harder to understand, I think. It is helpful. Now, the other scenarios are less well described. They basically give you some wording about, the historical situation, and then a setup and some kind of difficult to decipher statements. So some of them are easier than others. Let's put a die in here so I can get back there. Like, it's only going to be these two rounds, capacity 4 and 5. No events. Okay, there's going to be 7 projects, and I think it lists them coming through here, which took a little bit, and whether or not there's trade available. Full normal rules, but only 2 rounds. 1 round only, no events, no projects. This is just a little battle scenario to teach you the combat system. I did not get to combat in my game. However, what's not present is what they suggest you play first, which is basically, I think, starting here? I don't know what they suggest. Maybe they only suggest getting to here. I don't know. Somewhere they tell you to play something that's not even in the sequence, but whatever. Okay, so the general flow of play is on a turn, you have all these projects aligned, you have an event card already drawn. Those are in the between turn things and part of the setup, and we can do that in a moment. But what happens is one player, whoever has the most prestige, oh, no, here we go. Okay, so first you draw the, at the beginning of the game, you do a couple of things. You do this starting stuff. Whoever's got the most prestige will be reading the event card. And they apply the events that affect them, and the other player applies the effects that affect them. And I don't think the ordering matters there. But then, whoever has the least prestige, and at the beginning of the game that's a tie, the Spartans go first with ties, has to take 2 actions, and there are 12 actions in the game. They must take 2. If they don't take 2, they can take 1, but if they don't take 2, they have passed, and they will get to take no more actions. So Sparta's going to have to do 2 things, then Athens has to do 2 things, and you pass that back and forth, and then eventually one person has done 1 or 0 actions, and they're out from then on, and the other player can do as many actions as they like. Now, when you can only do 2 when you're doing 2 actions in your turn or whatever, they can't both be the same action. But when you can do as many as you like, you can do them in any order you like. So you can just keep doing the same action or whatever. The components of the game are limited. If you don't have enough cubes or whatever, you can't do it unless you can find some cubes later. Now they go into the specifics of the actions. Let me jump a little over. Let me just think if I want to do something else. Okay. At the end of your turn, you'll be handling any battles that happen, which happen only if there are 8 or more pieces of both players combined in a single location. Now, that's not possible in the first round of the game. And then you go through an end-of-round sequence in which you do some scoring, you feed your people, you grow your cities, you do some more scoring, you get some resource reduction, and then you're allowed to grab silver if you so desire. And then you go through a preparation for the next round, drawing an event card, putting the new projects in, all the old ones go away, etc. The game ends, and this is important to realize, and it's not early enough on, and I think it should be there. It ends automatically for a few reasons. If you can't supply your capital at the end of a turn period with wheat and prestige, you're going to have to, you lose your capital and you lose the game. And this is the only way you can lose your capital. If at the end of a round, you end up at 0 prestige, you're ostracized and lose the game immediately. Also, you have to put the game away. If at any time you have to lose prestige that you don't have available to lose, you lose the game immediately. I'm not sure how many options there are to lose prestige, but okay. If none of these conditions apply, the game ends after the 4th phase, which is Megalopolis, which is fine. You're not allowed to trade silver for prestige, so that's not an issue. Of the 4th round, nothing else can affect your score after that, so you could just do those things, and your victory point is going to be the population cubes of all your polis in your faction, your current prestige value, which I guess can only go to 30, the sum of all your prestige for posterity projects that you have polis that built them earlier in the game. They'll have a parenthesized value in them that's for the end of the game. And then whoever has the most victory points wins. If there's a tie, whoever has the most total resources left ends up as the winner. Okay. So, the different actions. You can create hoplites. In one polis, during your turn, you can pay 1 metal each to convert population cubes from that polis into hoplites. These are hoplites. These are the population cubes. There has to be room in the area for the hoplites, and that is the number on the round, which is used for other things too. But and if you don't want to spend metal, or if you can't, you can spend silver instead. But silver is much more flexible. And you can't take the last population cube from a polis to turn it into armies. There are 2 polises that are not in normal territory. They cannot create hoplites. Not sure how likely they are to get controlled. We'll see. You can create galleys. This works in a similar way. For each galley in one polis, for each galley you want to build, you have to pay 1 wood or a silver, and to move a population cube into the sea territory where the arrow points from that polis. And again, there are a couple of polises that can't do this. Sparta is one of them, and the other one is Thebes. They are unable to build boats. Again, you're limited by the round number as to how many pieces you can have in that sea area. You can create merchants. This can only be done in the 3 commercial cities, the ones with anchors. You have to be the right player and own the polis. Now that's easy for Athens, but for the 2 Spartan cities, it's possible they won't own them anymore, and then they can't use them for that. And the way you do this is for each merchant you want to build, you pay 1 wood or silver, and move a population cube from the board and replace it with one of these in your trade zone. you can begin a project. Okay, when you begin a project, there's a number of them located in the set. We can flip these over now. What the hell? And they have a type. So we have games, a statue, and a theater. That determines where they can be built. So here, Athens can build a theater, artist, or philosopher. Well, the theater is the only thing I could build in Athens. Sparta can build a temple, a statue, or a festival. Well, the statue is the only thing I'll be able to build in Sparta. If you select it, let's say Sparta is going to take this statue, they're going to have to pay the cost, which is on the left, and that'll be 2 wood. They rotate this so that the word is there. I don't know what that does for you. And put this project on top. So I'd have to pay 2 wood off my track, and I have to have it. At the end of the round, I get the prestige value there. And you can see each of these has a prestige value. The theater, for example, costs 2 silver, 2 wood, and a metal. Fairly expensive, but it gives 3 prestige. And then at the end of the game, whoever owns that Polis gets 1 additional prestige at the end of the game. These other prestige come at the end of the round, whoever owns it at that point. See, we don't have a special one. There are some that are special. In particular, the artist I know is special. Instead of giving a fixed value, it gives you half your population of the city for that round, rounded up. Okay, so that's the first type. What is that? Development actions. The next type is military actions. Military actions are always going to cost you a prestige to do. One is move hoplites. Movement is a little funky in this game. A lot of things are. Hoplites can start in different locations, but they all move to one location. Hoplites can either cross land territories or sea territories, but they can't go through both. There is an exception to this. Corinth, if you own Corinth itself, you are able to use the canal through there for sea movement to pass through there. But you never actually enter the land. You're doing sea movement only. Okay. A hoplite can be moved through sea territories. It has to begin moving to a sea territory adjacent to its starting land territory. Adjacency, I guess, not being related to this arrow. So Thessalia is adjacent to all of these. The movement has to end by moving from a sea territory to a land territory directly adjacent to it. You do not have to have any merchants or galleys in any territories that you cross. Hoplites, though, can't cross a territory, land or sea, that's controlled by the opponent. It's controlled by the opponent if it contains more units from one player than your opponent has. However, you can start or end your movement in an area that's controlled by the opponent. So, what this means is, if the enemy controls, say, Athens, Athenae here, the Spartans can't just walk through that, but they could go around by sea. So movement is very flexible, but while I can go around sea this way, I can't go through either of those because those are controlled by the Athenians as well. And that defines a lot of the terrain. Hoplites can never move through land areas whose capacity has already been reached. So capacity is the number of my own pieces in the area. And that capacity is based on this number. So if there's already, let's say the Athenians are here, they couldn't move by land up through their Athenian territory on the first round because they would exceed the capacity. I believe they're moved one at a time, though, so as long as there's some space in there, you can slide them through. This is dangerous because the order in which you move your hoplites could change the control of the area and thus make it impossible to move through in that way. I.e., if you're both at full capacity in an area, you're not going to be able to move through it, because you can't move through an area that you're at full capacity in. And if you move a unit out to make room, you no longer control the area. Okay, Corinth is a special case. You're allowed to move from here to here without paying any attention to Megaris. Areas not distinguished by a background color can never be entered by hoplites, and that's these spaces. Additionally, Sicily and Ionia can only be reached via sea. Okay, similarly, move galleys costs 1 prestige. You can move galleys the same way as you move hoplites, essentially. You're able to move them to the destination territory. They can start in different locations. They're not allowed to cross territories controlled by the opponent, but they can start and end movement in such territories, and you're allowed to sail through Corinth if you own it. Notably, you can't carry boats across the land anywhere else. Okay, the next military action is Besiege a Polis. This again costs you 1 prestige, but this can gain you prestige. Okay, this action is only chosen by the player if they have enough hoplites in which the polis is located. To besiege a polis, you must control the territory in which the polis is located, i.e. have more hoplites than the opponent, and you must have a number of hoplites at least equal to the fortification level of the city that you're sieging. The current population is irrelevant. The fortification level is written on both the game board as well as on the polis tile. It's the base population of the city. Now, this means Corinth and Syracuse cannot be sieged on the first round of the game. You can't get enough troops to do so. It's also not possible to siege these guys because you can't have hoplites there. And finally, you can't siege either Athens or Sparta. In order to siege, you roll the 4-sided die, and if you roll equal to or higher than the fortification of the polis, the siege is successful. So, it's automatic to succeed at taking a 1 polis. Okay, if the siege fails, the besieging player loses one of his units, and the besieged polis loses a population cube. If you lose the last remaining population cube this way, the city revolts against their ruler, and the polis becomes neutral. And then its population doesn't matter anymore. An unsuccessful siege can be repeated in subsequent turns, once per turn, if the player still fulfills all necessary conditions. But note, if you're losing a hoplite and you were at even, let's say you had 3 hoplites in Thebes, if you fail, and that's pretty likely, you need to get a 3 or 4 to succeed, then you can no longer siege it because you only have 2 hoplites there. Okay, the player who sees the polis takes a number of his cubes and places them next to the polis tile, just like we have over here, to indicate that he now owns it with its base population. If he takes the polis from an opponent, he replaces the number of cubes that the opponent had there. And again, this is from your stock. It doesn't eat up your hoplites. I gotta swap batteries. Consequence of a successful siege, I alluded to it, but I didn't mention it explicitly, is you get an amount of prestige equal to the fortification level of the polis you seized. Now, if the enemy had his proxenos in the city, you have taken him captive, and now if he wants to use it ever again, he has to do a specific action, release proxenos, in order to get him back for use. All right. Collecting tribute. This is a military action, but this is part of the economic engine of the game. Hey, it's a euro. It's got to have an economic engine, right? Okay. If you own a polis in a territory and you have hoplites there, you can spend a prestige to demand that they give you some resources. Each location, not each polis, each location in the game has its own little box. What happens is you can grab as many of your hoplites from an area and place it in resource boxes in that territory. These are the resources you're going to score. Okay, so here I would get 1 silver and 3 olive oil. Then these go back, they're not eaten by that, and I get this. And that indicates that nobody can collect resources from there again. Like I said, it costs 1 tribute, but there is an exception from that. It costs 1 prestige to collect tribute, which is in your home area, Sparta or Attica, you're allowed to collect without paying a prestige. That doesn't go for the opponent, though. So if the Spartans are pillaging the fields outside Athens, as happened historically again and again and again, they will have to still pay prestige in order to do it. Achaia does not have a polis, so anyone can do that if they have hoplites in the territory. It's not terribly rich, but it does mean you don't have to siege a city, which makes it a little cheaper to get stuff from it early in the game, but you're probably better off taking from locations where you have the city. All right, so those are the military actions, which all cost a point of prestige to use. Prestige is a very limited thing. During the course of a round, you will probably not get prestige except by sieging cities. I think it's the only way to get it. May be mistaken. Okay, then we go to what are called political actions. Trade is one of them. In order to trade, you have to be able to get from your... First of all, you have to have a trading city. You have to have a trading city available. That's an issue potentially for Sparta because they could actually lose both of theirs. You have to have a merchant ship in your trade center. Your merchant ship has to be able to get from your trade center to the location you want to trade at. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trade areas on the board. In order to get there, you follow these little paths. Basically, you move through a sea area to get to, or through a series of sea areas. Let's see. You may also move through Corinth if you control it. And there's no merchant route going through there. And I think, I'm not sure why they have words about these merchant routes. I think everything that you could possibly want to do can be done. You're basically just moving through the sea areas to get to the trade areas, but whatever. Okay. Once you get to a trade area, what do? Well, the only trades that are available are those that are equal to or less than the round that you're on. So we only have, not there, we only have the level 3 trades available on the first round of the game. The level 5s are only available on the last 2 rounds, where that area kind of becomes a colonized region. They're expressed as a trade good that you get either grain or silver for. So, if Sparta goes here, they could trade wood for grain on the first round. The cost for that is determined here. At the beginning of the game, these are all on the left. You take a look at the cube corresponding to wood, compare it to the amount of grain or silver you're going to get, and that's the cost in wood that you're going to pay. If you trade goods for goods, after you do so, you roll a die, and that's how many spaces your cube moves to the right. And that's going to decrease the value of the good that you're trading in relationship to silver and grain. You might not have the goods you need to trade, in which case you're allowed to buy grain. You can't buy silver with anything. If you want to buy grain, you move your merchant there, and you pay an amount of silver equal to the load of grain that you want to that you're purchasing. You have to purchase that entire load. So in that case, you know it will always be 3. The value of silver and grain doesn't fluctuate in relationship to each other. You make the transfer on your track. This is the same thing that you do when you do a normal trade. I didn't explain it there, but like if I'm trading 3 wood, I'd move the 3 wood down and I'd move 3 grain up, right? Okay. If I'm trading 3 silver, I move the 3 silver down and I get 3 grain back. I might have to trade more wood if the value of wood has decreased. When I make a trade with silver, at the end of that trade, the value of the resource that I'm not using, explicitly not using, so here I'd be not using wood if I spend silver instead, is moved to the left by 2 die rolls on the 4-sided die. So purchases with silver inflate the value of the good that you're not delivering. Okay. Move the proxenos. All right, I didn't do this. In order to do this, you can move it from one polis to another. It's moved like a hoplite, either via land or sea, but it's not detained by blockades. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Blockades is, I think, when there are enemy pieces in the way. To move the proxenos, you put him in the surrounding polis that he started in, and then you can move from territory to territory until you end in the polis of a land territory. Like a hoplite, you can move through either land or sea. And you're allowed to use, and they give the word for it now, diolkos, the canal, if you control Corinth. If your enemy, you can't place your proxenos in the same space as your enemy has his proxenos. You are allowed to move by sea to these, but not by land. Thebes and Sparta don't have harbors, and you must move by land to get to them. The proxenos cannot be stopped by blockades, but every enemy unit in every territory you cross, you have to pay a silver for. This just goes to the bank. It doesn't go to the enemy player. You're bribing the troops, not the player. And you want to be careful because if the polis that a proxenos is in ends up besieged, you could end up getting captured and losing him for a while. And if you do lose him, you can pay a ransom of 2 silver to your opponent to get him back, and it returns to your capital. Now, here you're actually paying to the opponent. What's the proxenos good for? Well, if he's in a city, a neutral polis or one controlled by the opponent, he can instigate a civil war. He has to bribe, though. The amount of silver necessary is dependent on the polis itself. If it's neutral, you pay twice its base population. If it's controlled by the opposing player, you have to pay 3 times the current population of the city to convert it over. And I believe you can't do this in the capital. You could put your proxenos in the capital. That is just kind of a waste, though. A civil war will always result in the polis changing sides. The player whose proxynos instigates it receives the polis tile and places his own cubes. He takes one of his discs and puts it on the polis location, and, he gets an amount of prestige equal to the population bribed, not the silver paid. So, yeah, it's another way to get the prestige. Okay, what about battles? Battles only happen if there are 8 or more pieces at the end of your 2 actions, or even 1 action, in a turn. Now, if someone passed, the other person still gets to act, and battles will happen after they're done acting, but they get all their actions before any battles are determined. The battles are going to be rounds where combat cards are used. That deck is shuffled. It's the X deck up there. And each player gets a number of cards equal to the number of troops that they currently have in the area under battle. In the combat round, one player will be the attacker, and the other is the defender. And they're going to swap who's the attacker, who's the defender. The attacker has the advantage at any given moment. They're the one who can cause problems. Okay. The attacker puts 2 of his cards face up, and then the defender has to try to match them as best as they can, or else they will take casualties and or cause prestige. Another reason for prestige. Cause prestige gains to the attacker. Okay. Each card will show a formation as well as a maneuver, or it's a special card, the Mercenaries or Salpink's Call. When both the attacker and defender have played their cards, each pair is examined. First the formations are compared, then the maneuvers are compared. And we can take a look at some of these. So here's one, cavalry doing a hold maneuver, or if it's navy, it's triremes doing a kick close maneuver. Here's one of the special ones, etc. All right, let's take a look at what happens. If the defender was unable to match a particular formation that the attacker has, he loses one of his units in that territory, and the attacker will get whatever prestige points are shown at the top left corner of the card. If the defender manages to play the correct formation, he doesn't lose a unit. The attacker will only get prestige if his card is higher, a higher positive number than the defender, in which case he gets the difference between their prestige points. And this is done for both cards the attacker plays compared to the 2 cards the defender plays. All cards played are discarded, and both players get new cards from the combat deck. The previous attacker will always get 2 cards, but the defender gets 1 card less for every loss he suffered. So he can lose at most 2 pieces. If he loses 2 pieces, he doesn't get any additional cards back. But if he loses 1 piece, he gets 1 card back. If he loses no pieces, he gets both cards. Then you swap, and the former defender is now the attacker and gets to play. This will continue until there aren't enough cards left in the combat deck for both players, or one player decides to retreat. They pay a prestige to do this, and this is done before cards are drawn. It can be done before the first round of combat. Following a combat round, if the defender has less than 2 units in the territory fought over, the battle is over. If any one of these conditions is met, the battle ends, even if there are still 8 or more units in the territory concerned. Yeah. The earliest possibility for a repeated battle in this territory will be after the opposing player's turn. It's also possible that the situation occurs in which one player has already passed, in which case the battle happens after that player passes. There's a couple of special cards we haven't covered in the battle that aren't formation maneuver. There's Mercenaries. These are a joker. It can be played by the defender against any card and counts as matching the formation, except it can't be used against the Salpink's Call. If it's played by the attacker, it can be matched with any other formation and will never create any casualties. The South Banks card can never be matched by the defender and will always create casualties. However, the player of this card has to pay a penalty of 1 prestige for using the card. If played by the defender, it does not create casualties. So it cancels out the casualties, but you're apparently not doing the right maneuver. And it adds to the overall prestige difference if that's an issue, which it would be. Okay. After both players have passed completely and any battles resulting from the final pass are resolved, all the projects are completed. The project tile goes under the Polis tile, which is then faced properly for whatever reason, and you get an amount of prestige equal to the unparenthesized prestige. Whoever controls that Polis at that point. Then you have to pay supply. You have to pay a number of wheat equal to the total number of population cubes that you have in all your poli. If you can't pay it, then you have some choices. You can pay with prestige at a 1-to-1 ratio. I thought you could pay silver for this. Huh. Guess not. Okay. Or you have to return polis to neutrality, discarding them with any of their projectiles until you can pay their cost of all the ones that you have available. Both aspects can be combined if necessary. However, you can't discard population from your polis. You can't just kill people in order to feed less. Okay, after you pay your supply, if you have remaining wheat, you're allowed to pay 1 wheat to place... you're able to pay 1 wheat per cube to place new cubes into polises. That's limited by the growth factor and the overall maximum size of the polis. If you happen, after this, you hit the megalopolis side, to have more citizens than the city started with, you get 1 prestige for each of your polises who has more cities than it started with. You don't get a bonus for having Athens at 10. That's just still 1 prestige for that. Finally, grapes, olives, and wheat rot. You lose half your perishable goods, rounding up the remainder. I don't know what that means. I think you lose the rounded up value, but that's not absolutely certain to me. Finally, you're allowed to tax your city-states. You can spend a prestige. For each prestige you spend, you can get a silver for it. That's a pretty expensive trade. Okay. Then you go to preparations for the next round. The round track marker moves up. All the discs in the tribute boxes go back. All the merchants in merchant spaces go back to your merchant home. All the project tiles get swept away and a new set of 3 is drawn at random. A new event card, and again there's 8 for each period I think, is drawn. And then whoever had the least prestige will start the new round. Now, we talked about how the game ends. If you can't supply your capital, if you drop to 0 prestige at the end of the round, either of those, you lose. If you end up going below 0 prestige for any reason, you lose. Otherwise, after all 4 phases, the megalopolis round, which is the last thing of any importance at that point, causes you to add up the number of population cubes you control, your current prestige, and any prestige for posterity you still control. And we talked about that. There is a variant here. Oh, here's what they say. Play 3 rounds instead of 4, end the game after 5A. This is not one of the optional scenarios in the back. And it's not really explained what these are. They're just like kind of tagged on here, but I guess they're kind of self-explanatory. I was able to figure it out, so Must be pretty simple. Whenever a siege on a neutral polis... Okay, so this is an option. Whenever a siege on a neutral polis is unsuccessful, place the killed hoplite onto the besieged polis tile. If the player on his next turn opts to continue the siege, he gets +1 for each hoplite on the besieged polis tile. If the player does not continue the siege on the next turn, or if the player loses control. I don't know if I want to play that or not. I don't think so, but we'll see. All right, so that's the rules of the game. Like I said, I found myself really kind of struggling with all these different levers and not quite sure what I'm playing and what I'm trying to do. My biggest worry is, will I be able to feed my people? I cheated and allowed silver to be used instead of grain at that point, which you can't do. You can't eat silver. You have to make sure your merchants get you enough food. There's a lot of numbers to balance. You're trying to balance out what you can build on any given round, how you are going to be able to grab materials, and whether trades are going to play into that. And you're doing this kind of resource exchange type thing that vaguely reminds me, for whatever reason, of Bazaar, the old 3M game, where you're compiling items to get different items and try to get sets that just get you victory points or whatever. But that it has that kind of feel to it, but with like a lot more going on the board to handle that. And so I think that's a little unfair to say it reminds me of that, but something about the trading and the resource production does kind of remind me of that. You're exchanging, a couple prestige, one to move your units, one to do the collection, to get these other things, and then these other things get you, stuff that you can trade to get silver and wheat that you need at the end of the turn, but also to get you the sets that you need to turn in for these, that get you prestige in exchange. And you've got this kind of rotating wheel of stuff you're trying to produce and generate. That's the engine of the game, right? As far as I can see, it's much less militarily focused and much more focused on trying to arrange your trade goods so that you can get the scores that you want, and that you can feed your people, because you don't want to stop feeding your people if you can help it. Okay, let's send it up and see what happens. I'll probably start it tomorrow because it's late.